So if your goal is to pack on as much lean muscle mass as you possibly can, while also staying lean and inside the 10 to 15% body fat range, where you can always see at least a bit of your muscle definition and your abs, one of the toughest places to start out is skinny fat. The issue with starting out skinny fat is that you're dealing with two problems almost equally at the same time. Number one, you have body fat to lose, and number two, you don't have much muscle mass. It's much easier to be in a situation where you either have a lot of body fat to lose or you are skinny but also lean, because in those two situations you know exactly what direction you need to move in and your primary goal is clear. You either need to lose fat or build muscle. On the other hand, if you are skinny fat, trying to figure out what direction you need to move in can be confusing and a bit more complicated, and it will also take a little longer to see progress and reach your end goal, which can make it harder to trust the process. And trust in the process is extremely important when it comes to transforming your physique. So when it comes to being skinny fat, the first question and one of the hardest questions to answer is, where do you start? Do you bulk? Do you cut? Or do you try to do a body recomposition phase and lose fat and build muscle at the same time? So lucky for you, when I first started my physique transformation journey 9 years ago, I myself started off as skinny fat. So in this video, I'm gonna tell you specifically exactly what I did and the mistakes that I made that made it harder and made it take me longer than it had to, so you can avoid making those same mistakes. I'm gonna tell you exactly what I would do differently if I knew what I knew now back then. I'm going to cover the 3 types of skinny fat to help you easily identify which type of skinny fat you are. And then I'm gonna break down exactly what you need to do based on what type of skinny fat you are. So let's start by covering the 3 types of skinny fat so you can identify which type you are, all right? So first we have skinny fat type 1, skinny soft. So being skinny soft means you don't have much muscle mass at all, but you also don't have a whole lot of body fat either. Just enough body fat to cover your abs, maybe some small love handles, and little to no muscle mass or fat at all on your chest, your shoulders, your arms, your legs. And your body weight is anywhere from underweight to somewhere in the normal weight range relative to your height. So this was exactly the type of skinny fat that I was when I started out. I was skinny soft. So I was about 5 foot 8 inches, about 140 pounds, with no sign of my abs or any muscle definition at all anywhere on my body, and virtually no muscle mass on my chest, my shoulders, my arms, my back, or my legs. Okay, so then we have skinny fat type 2, equally skinny and fat. So being equally skinny and fat means you're still not obese, but you're somewhere on the top end of the normal weight range, or maybe slightly overweight relative to your height, and you have a decent amount of body fat, but still little to no muscle mass. You have a bit of a belly, some love handles, a bit of fat on your chest, and maybe a little on your shoulders, your arms, your upper back, and legs. So an example of this would be a guy who's about 5 foot 10, 170 to 190 pounds. Okay, and then lastly, we have skinny fat type 3, fat skinny. So being fat skinny means you're more on the fat end of the spectrum and definitely have a good amount of body fat to lose. So you definitely have a good amount of belly fat, some love handles, a layer of fat over your chest, your arms, your upper back, your shoulders, and your legs. And you're definitely overweight, but you're not quite obese relative to your height. So an example of this would be a guy who's about 5 foot 10, 190 to 210 pounds. So as you may have noticed, these 3 types of skinny fat exist on a spectrum. Skinny soft is on the skinny end of the skinny fat spectrum, and then we have equally skinny and fat in the middle, and then fat skinny on the fatter end of the skinny fat spectrum. So now let's take a look at what the best course of action for each type of skinny fat is. Should you bulk, should you cut, or should you attempt to recomp and lose body fat and build muscle at the same time? It's not really black and white. and you do actually have some options based on your preferences, but I'll break those options down and simplify the decision for you. And the way that I'm going to do that is by outlining all of the pros and cons of bulking, of cutting, and of body recomposition, and then I'll explain how they should be applied to each type of skinny fat for optimal physique transformation results. So when it comes to bulking, the pros are: number one, you're gonna put on muscle the fastest. Number two, you're gonna look bigger and better in clothes. Number three, you're going to gain strength faster and easier. And lastly, you're going to see more progress and have a little more fun making progress when it comes to training in the gym. Now, the cons of bulking are: if you bulk, fat gain is inevitable. There's no way around it. You're gonna look worse without a shirt on. The inevitable fat gain is going to hide muscle definition, and the longer you bulk for and the further you get over 20% body fat, the more you're putting yourself at risk for health issues associated with being overweight. So when we look at all of the pros and the cons of the bulking route, it's clear that the bulk approach is best for guys who are skinny fat type 1, skinny soft, and on the skinnier end of the skinny fat spectrum. So it makes the most sense for someone who is skinny soft to prioritize building muscle for at least 3 to 6 months and potentially up to even a year, depending on your rate of weight gain. When it comes to bulking, there's 2 ways that you can go about it based on your preferences. Option 1 is you can do a lean bulk, where you keep your weekly rate of weight gain in the 0.25% to 5% range of your body weight. So if you decide to go with the lean bulk option, you're going to need to make sure to commit to at least 4 months, up to as long as 12 months, because you'll be making gains slowly to keep them lean. So for that reason, you're going to need to allow yourself the time to really pack on a good amount of muscle onto your frame, okay? So option 2 is you can do a more aggressive bulk, where you can allow your weekly rate of weight gain to creep up a little bit past 0.5% and reach up to a max of about 0.5% per week. So for most people, I highly recommend going with the lean bulk. But if preference-wise, you'd rather gain muscle and strength and progress in the gym faster, and you're okay with a trade-off of gaining a little more body fat, the more aggressive approach is okay too. And this way you don't have to commit to quite as long of a time frame. And if you go with the more aggressive approach, you can limit it to as little as 3 months for as long as up to 8 months max. And if you can handle a little extra body fat, it might be an okay approach for you. Now, one of the most important things to consider when it comes to bulking is the fact that you're really going to have to trust the process and make sure your expectations are realistic. For example, as I mentioned earlier, skinny soft was the skinny fat category I was in when I started, so I took the bulk approach myself. However, I made a lot of mistakes along the way, and those mistakes were rooted in the fact that my expectations were not realistic. More specifically, I did not understand that when you bulk, you're not going to see much improvement in physical appearance when it comes to muscle definition, and you're likely going to see no improvement in physical appearance when it comes to muscle definition at all. And for this reason, it's extremely common that guys will start a bulk and then about 6 to 8 weeks in, start to question the process because you're not seeing the kind of physical appearance results that you're after. So for me, what that looked like is I stopped my first bulk prematurely because I wasn't happy with the way I looked. And what I did is I attempted to cut and lose some of the body fat, hoping that I could lean out a bit and improve my appearance. Now again, this is an extremely common mistake, and a mistake you absolutely do not want to make, you absolutely want to avoid making, because one of the most important things about bulking is allowing the time to build up some momentum to actually give that muscle a chance to accumulate and settle on your physique. So effectively, all you're doing by stopping your bulk prematurely is extending the amount of time that it's going to take to gain the amount of muscle that you want. So make sure that if you decide to bulk, you fully commit to it, you stick to the time frame that you decide on in the beginning, and you trust the process. And the thing that's gonna help you do this the most is having realistic expectations that you're not gonna see much muscle definition and visual progress, and therefore instead focusing on your progress in the gym. All right, so now let's take a look at cutting. So when it comes to cutting, the pros are you're gonna look better without clothes. You're gonna see much more progress visually in terms of muscle definition. So you'll start to see your abs, maybe some vascularity, some muscle striations, which will lead to more confidence, some more motivation, and overall enjoyment in the process. You'll feel better in terms of mental energy. You'll be in a much better position to make lean gains while keeping your body fat under control, simply because the leaner you start a bulk, the leaner you'll stay as you bulk. If you start with a cut, it will make it easier to stay in the 10 to 15% body fat range in the future when you shift to focusing on building muscle. Now, the cons of cutting are you won't gain as much or potentially any muscle at all depending on your past training and dieting experience. You won't gain muscle and strength as fast. And if you spend too much time cutting, that's simply less time spent gaining muscle, and therefore it will take you a bit longer to get close to your full muscle gain potential. So when we look at the pros and cons of cutting, it's clear that cutting is going to be ideal for guys who are either skinny fat type 2, so equally skinny and fat, and definitely for guys who are skinny fat type 3, fat skinny. So while cutting is a no-brainer for guys who are skinny fat type 3, for guys who are type 2, it's going to be more based on preference. So if you're a type 2 who prefers to see visual progress and maybe mentally you don't like to carry around too much body fat and you're okay with delaying muscle gain focus for a little while so you can get leaner and stay lean when you're ready to start to gain, then the best approach for you as a type 2 is starting out with a cut to get down to about 10 to 12% body fat and then a lean bulk from there. Okay, so now lastly, let's take a look at body recomposition, aka losing fat and building muscle at the same time. Now, the body recomposition route can be applied to any of the 3 skinny fat types. The thing is, it's only possible to recomp and lose fat and gain muscle at the same time if you fit within a certain criteria. And if you do fit that criteria, recomp is only possible for a limited period of time. So to break down the pros and cons of recomping, starting with the pros, there's really only one pro of the body recomposition route, but it is a big one, and it's the fact that you get the best of both worlds at the same time, and if done right, you're going to gain muscle, see incredible progress in the gym, and lose body fat, and see some great progress visually as well. Now, the cons are it's not easy to do successfully in most cases. You need to be super dialed in for it to work well, and there's not much margin for error. It takes time and patience. It can be hard to measure progress as you're either going to be maintaining the same body weight or losing weight at a slow rate, and the progress can be virtually undetectable beyond visual progress that you'll notice maybe like on a monthly basis and the strength gains in the gym. So because it's hard to gauge progress, it's also hard to know when you've plateaued and when it's time to shift your focus. So as I mentioned, body recomposition can work for you if you're in any of the 3 types of skinny fat. The more important criteria you need to meet is the following. You're a total beginner and you've never lifted weights in your life. A body recomposition phase will work really well for you in this case. If you are detrained, meaning you've taken a month or more completely off of training, you've never trained or dieted properly at all, you have the knowledge to get super dialed in with your training and diet and the capacity to do so for at least 3 months. So that's the criteria. So now that you know the type of skinny fat you are and what your options are, you should have a pretty solid idea around what direction you need to move in. However, if you're still a bit confused, this quick summary will help you make your decision with absolute certainty. So if you're on the skinny end of the skinny fat spectrum, so you're skinny fat type 1, skinny soft, the direction you need to move in is simple, and that is to do a bulk and commit to at least the next 4 months to that bulk. And if you want to keep that bulk as lean as possible, commit the next 6 months up to a year to that bulk. If you're in the middle of the spectrum, so you're skinny fat type 2, equally skinny and fat, the direction that you decide to move in will require a little more thought. So first, I would consider your current body composition. Personally, I wouldn't recommend that someone who is above 20% body fat to do a bulk in any case. So unless you're okay with putting on more excess body fat, putting yourself at higher risk for health issues associated with having higher body fat, and making it so in order to get lean and see muscle definition, you'll have to cut harder and longer, you can rule out bulking altogether. If you're skinny fat type 2, you're closer to 15% body fat and you're either a complete beginner, detrained, or have never followed a solid training and nutrition plan consistently, this is probably the best scenario to attempt a recomp. But I have to remind you, if you do go with the recomp approach, in order for it to work well, you need to know what you're doing and be extremely dialed in. So it's a good idea to maybe look at hiring a professional to guide you through it. And lastly, if you're skinny fat type 3, fat skinny, and on the fatter end of the skinny fat spectrum, the best way to go is with a cut. The nice thing about being skinny fat type 3 and on the fatter end of the spectrum is when you do go with a cut, if you cut slow, you keep your protein intake high, so at least above 1 gram per pound of body weight, it's likely that recomposition will occur anyways, and as you lose weight, you will gain a bit of muscle mass and lose fat at the same time with the weight loss, okay? And finally, don't overthink this too much. Commit to an approach, plan it out, and stick to it. The most important thing you can do to transform your physique is just get moving, taking action, and making progress. So that's it for this video. My last piece of advice is for you to make sure to hit that subscribe button below, hit the bell icon to enable notifications so you don't miss my future videos. Check out the links in the description to follow me on other platforms, and check out options to work with me to help you get into the best shape of your life. Leave a thumbs up if the video was helpful, and we'll catch you on the next one.